Welcome to Climate Channel, Climate Conversation with Quamrul Chowdhury, episode 63. In this 63rd episode, we are going to discuss our road to Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27 in Egypt, come November. We have seen lots of ups and downs in last 25 years after creation of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 91-92 in New York. And that Framework Convention came into force in 1995. And in the first Conference of Parties in Berlin in 1995, we had Berlin mandate to craft Kyoto Protocol in 1997. Then we had lot of ups and downs, lot of negotiations, parleys to stabilize the ultimate objective of the Framework Convention on Climate Change, to stabilize the global greenhouse gas concentration. And in landmark 2015 Paris Agreement, the whole world united to craft the Paris Agreement and declare the goal 1.5 degrees limit, the rise of temperature. In Glasgow COP26 last November, that was hammered again after the return of United States in January 2021 with Joe Biden's presidency. Before that, we saw a turmoil after Paris Agreement with the withdrawal of United States of America under Donald Trump presidency. But the world moved on, tried to have a net zero. Now, almost all the agenda items have been moved for Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27, come November, including fixing adaptation global goal, definition of adaptation, definition of climate finance, and revisiting NDCs, nationally determined contribution of every country, every major economies, and coal phase out or phase down debate still hanging on the balance, and climate finance is still a thorny issue. Adaptation finance doubling or quadrupling, whatever may be, is still trickling down. And Paris rulebook was set, agreed upon in Glasgow, but there are still a lot of loopholes. And what about market mechanism, non-market mechanism, carbon pricing, carbon taxing, and so on and so forth. So with all those issues confronting us right now, right before Sharm el-Sheikh, or even Doha COP28 or COP29 in Eastern Europe, what will happen? That should be negotiated, and negotiators, climate scientists, IPCC AR6 report, all those are before us. So without much ado, I would now like to ask Joe Robertson to kick off the discussion, conversation, climate conversation.
Thank you, Quamrul. Thank you, Quamrul. On the road to COP27, from the perspective of Citizens Climate International as a network of stakeholders in 76 countries around the world, we see stakeholder engagement as one of the areas that needs a lot more progress. We got a good Glasgow work program for action for climate empowerment, but now we need a work plan that's going to put that into practice. And I think a frank assessment would say that most countries haven't fully valued how important the so-called action for climate empowerment under Article 6 of the Convention, Article 12 of the Paris Agreement is. We need to see all nations really showing progress on not only education and training, but also public access to information. I think we all know that the world is facing a very serious increase in coordinated disinformation, and that disrupts the ability of communities to act on climate. It disrupts the ability of national governments to direct funds where they should go without suffering political consequences that they shouldn't. They should be doing things they're celebrated for, and instead they're seeing a backlash that's induced by lies in many cases. So we see stakeholder engagement as something that needs a lot more attention. And you mentioned the global goal on adaptation, and the Paris Agreement gives us guidance about what that needs to achieve, but there's no 1.5 target, there's no net zero target for adaptation. And we've had this conversation before, and I think it's, for us, it's one of the priorities this year is to start having more discussion about, can we get to a zero harm standard? The convention says avoid dangerous human-caused climate change. 1.5 is the target agreed in Paris and Glasgow. And so if we know how to avoid dangerous climate change and we've agreed to do it, then we should also be agreeing that people shouldn't suffer preventable harm at the hands of others. That is a reasonable goal to set for ourselves, even though it sounds idealistic and lofty. It can help us organize the way that we invest in infrastructure, the way that we invest in development, the way that we invest in even debt relief, the way that we create institutions that respond to the crises emerging from climate disruption. So we're seeing that as a major priority. And, I can go through a whole list of other things, but I would say that between the non-market approaches to overall decarbonization under Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement and the need to mainstream climate finance, we see a lot of room for creative collaboration between high-level and ground-level actors. And we think that climate finance needs to become much more everybody's business, much more inclusive. We need to find ways to include the stakeholders that have never been included in any kind of financial transaction before in the flow of funds to finance the climate smart future.
Thank you very much, Joe, for setting that one. George, what is your take, your reflection?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chowdhury, and I'll be fairly brief. From our point of view, and we're an economics and strategy advisory and think tank based in Geneva, Switzerland. And as an observer to the process, from our point of view, we think that in 2022, the focus really needs to shift to implementation. And that's because we've just been through a gruesome process of updating NDCs, a lot of energy, a lot of political capital was expensed on that. That was completed at COP26 through the able leadership of the UK presidency. And we think really the focus on further scaling up individual mitigation plans in 2022 is probably not productive. We recognize that there continues to be a gap, but it's just, we've just been through that exercise. And really, by focusing on implementation is really where the needs will, where it makes sense to do, and what it makes sense to do in 2022. Now that's implementation of national actions, but crucially, it's also implementation of climate finance commitments by developed countries. Our analysis, which I'm happy to post in the chat, really shows that there's a strong correlation between mitigation plans and delivered climate finance. For future mitigation plans to be more ambitious, current climate finance from developed to developing countries needs to scale up. Making good on existing commitments taken by developed countries, existing climate finance commitments, that's this $100 billion that developed countries had committed to per year, has the potential to crowd in an additional $600 billion in financing from other sources. So this really is a critical element for climate policy, not just today, but also if we're to have any shot for future scale up in climate action.
Thank you, George, for flagging implementation and climate finance. Major ramp up of climate finance is essential to cut back emissions quickly, steeply, and achieving net zero fast. Tony.
Hello.
You are on the field.
I'm
across
on
Africa. You are
yes.
In the grassroots, in the community, in the say implementation.
Yes. Yes.
On the front line. So,
yes.
What is your reflection, your experience, your thought?
The most important thing that I was hoping for at COP26 was firming up and having a proper rule book and standardization of carbon credits, especially in Africa, because everybody thinks that African carbon credits are a bit dodgy and you might get $6, whereas in another country, then you might get a lot more. So that sort of harms the potential for implementation. What we are doing, my company AOTA Global and the project I'm running, Climate Crisis Team, I'm providing, with the Climate Crisis Team projects, I'm providing a communications toolkit to assist people, not just in my company, but across countries, different countries in Africa, and literally thousands of different groups of people to set up projects around industrial hemp growing and processing. But I'm going to widen that out to carbon char and other things as well, like biochar. We're just talking to beginning to move into Kenya, be appointing our country representative in Kenya in April. He currently works for the United Nations. So we're looking at doing very exciting things there, making organic fertilizer and so on. But going back to the core conversation, then, as I say, we're providing this toolkit, which I've nearly finished, but I've had difficulties in the last couple of months because of bereavement. So I'm now beginning to get back into work again, thank goodness. But yes, implementation is vitally important. We are getting on with that. We're not waiting for things to, we're not waiting for November. And we're sort of getting on with the job as fast as possible. And so I think that's like totally important. But as I say, any help with, getting the carbon credits all sorted out, then that would be wonderful. That would be the main thing, because then we have something that we can build in with the trade and with the the whole. It's all got to work within commerce. It's all got to work for people. With the Kenya thing, then I was asked to that I'm talking to someone who's got 500 million euros of EU carbon credits to invest in African projects. So we're looking at some big projects in Kenya. If the carbon credits could be sorted out, then that would be amazingly useful and would really allow us to make great progress and concrete progress on all sorts of fronts. And not just, as I say, me, my project, my company, but thousands of groups of people that can get together and make things actually happen. And the end result of the program I'm running is to capture as much CO2 as possible. And there is a potential with 202 million hectares of marginal unused arable land to capture up to 3.6 billion tons of CO2 a year, which is more than, I don't know for a fact, but in my mind, that's probably more than everything else in the world combined.
So I'll come back to you again, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you for your initial thought. Felix.
Yes, I've been trying to work out this camera and don't know what's wrong with it. But sorry about that. So, I really want, but
share your take.
Yeah, there's very many interesting things kind of going. I mean, because I think one of the things that came out of Glasgow's COP26 is we have the global stocktake kind of going on, and I think the capacity for a lot of people to actually kind of really participate or have a lot of confidence in the global stocktake is actually quite small. With that, we've got to look at the UNFCC aspects of the stocktake, and then all the processes outside of the global of the UNFCCC process. So talking to people like Tony and Joe is really interesting when you're looking at like the stakeholder engagement requirements and things like this, because you're very much part of this. But then we've also got the issue of, okay, the NDCs kind of being revisited pretty much every year, in some respects actually diminishes the need for that global stocktake at the same time. But then with that, we've got two issues. We're looking at NDCs, is that under Article 6, we've got all the voluntary carbon markets, which gives us issues of the integrity of a carbon, as Tony's just the issue of what's actually going to be at the UN level, accepted at UN level, and therefore incorporated into the NDCs. And it's a shame you can't see me because I'm waving my hands frantically in the air as I talk about this. It's a fascinating scenario. What's really going to win out? Because what we do seem to need is a sense of scalability of the VCMs into a UN process. And that's going to take an awful lot of stakeholder engagement at the government level, at the private sector level as well, because otherwise we're all going to generate these carbon credits, but they're going to be for private sector use, and you're probably not going to get the price that's required. I mean, I find it interesting now that a European Union allowance is about €97.50. At what point, which is really what carbon pricing is meant to do, will it soon be cheaper to actually do carbon capture storage if you're generating either coal or gas kind of electricity, and we're getting into that ballpark figure. So that's encouraging. So what we need is really that whole kind of input at the kind of the government level, at the private sector and other stakeholders level, to make sure we get that scalability and integrity and verifiability. Any thoughts you have?
Yeah. So thank you, Felix. I would now like to request Sharif, share your experience, your thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Quamrul, for inviting me in these sessions. As this is my first session with you, I just introduce myself. My name is Dr. Sharif Uddin Ahmed. I'm founder president of World Talent Economy Forum. Here, I find you have a very good friends from different country, different part of the world. One of the things always missing around the world, and I'm working with these missing points, like everybody discussing about investment as well as technology, but nobody care about people. I care about people. That's why I focus on talent economy. Before the session, you discuss about action. World Talent Economy Forum, more in actions. We are developing millions of people in developing world based on modern science, engineering, and technology. Yes, finance is important. Technology is important. Always in COP26 and all of the big forum, we always find that they are discussing about investment, Developing world, they are struggling with the investments, lot of things. But when we discuss about ESG, Sustainable Development Goals, how many people actually understand about SDG? Example, in Malaysia, I live in Malaysia. 70%? No, not at all. They do not have any idea even about SDG. They do not have involvement with the SDG. So how come the developed world or this kind of forum will change this world? They have to engage with people. Let's say in Malaysia, the largest corporation, Sunway Group, they are working with SDG. But what about the small medium enterprise? What about the grassroots level people? It's happened in Bangladesh, it happened in Rwanda, it's happened in Malaysia, it's happened in Indonesia, China, India, everywhere. So this is the missing point. We have to engage with the people. People means the grassroots level people. So World Talent Economy Forums, as a president, we involve with the Harvard Business Schools to MIT, to Stanford, to UNs, to all of the largest research organizations, more than thousands of researchers, they're joining in World Talent Economy Forum. You can check the WTEF Forum. So our major objective, we have to create awareness, first thing first. If we just wait, some of the big company will come and they will solve my country or my motherland's climate change related problem. It's too late. So better we have to take our actions. I believe developing nations do not have financial problem. Only thing is that I can remember in my childhood in 1988 or 90, there is a big flood. We are not waiting for some of the big countries or some of the big people. My local community, my grassroots level people, they are able to handle this flood. They are able to handle cyclone. They are able to handle all kinds of things. So fact is that we have to develop these people. We have to develop the knowledge-based communities who can solve climate change. We have to develop the peoples who can handle all of the big problems. Let's say green technology they can invent, water purification they can invent, new green technology they can invent. We have to develop the startup ecosystem. We have to develop more research centers. So what I did with a lot of organization, I can remember from Japan with B Laboratory, more than 660 researchers, they joined with us. We are working together. We are engaging. We are providing education, knowledge, and research-based community to the developing nations completely free. So it's actually possible. If we have a proper knowledge, we can solve. So that's why I believe this is the high time. We have to focus on people. We have to focus on the grassroots level people. The more we can engage with the people, because Mr. Quamrul said that we are arranging a lot of conference, lot of seminar, lot of symposium, but no action. I agree with you. So when the action actually we can take, when our grassroots level people, our 90% people, those who are not engaged with this kind of big strategy, when they can take the initiative, they can solve the problem and they are able to. We cannot wait for the large company. They have to develop their own solution. That time we can solve. And already example, country like Malaysia, their government engaged with us. In the Dubai Expo, we go for public-private partnership. Rwanda, they engage with us. Indian government, they engage with us. And we are working with the people. And I believe with this talent economy solution, we can solve millions of people problem. And we have to empower people.
You are right that people must be at the center, and that's what Rio conference almost 30 years back it was agreed upon. People-centered economic growth, sustainable development, even Millennium Development Goals should be set with the people. People's participatory environmental management action plans are crafted. People-centered, say, national adaptation plans should be formulated. People-centered, say, NDCs, nationally determined contribution. The philosophy behind it was that people will be consulted. People will be taken into confidence, and they will decide how much they will cut back their emissions and set their NDCs in the form of nationally determined contribution. Unfortunately, we, in many developed countries, didn't consult our people. So it is not the failure of the convention. It is not the failure of the forefathers of the framework convention. It is the failure of our own masters who could marshal that people's participatory engagement in the form of formulation of national adaptation plans, nor NDCs, nor climate finance. Because it is my own observation, in my own experience, I have seen not only in Bangladesh, not only in Mozambique, in Bhutan, in Nepal, in Malawi, in many countries of Africa, Latin America, Asia, Pacific, Caribbean countries. I have traveled a lot, tried to marshal all the people's power, mobilization of the people, even our academics, our professors, our gurus, our pundits, our scientists, our community people, because they are the real change makers, even our private sector. But many times, many of our governments across the world are very shy still and try to do itself of their own, at their whim, and many a times try to shift the burden to next generation, next government, not my government's tenure, trying to shift it to next government's tenure or next one. That way, we try to shift the burden. But now is the time to take concrete actions onto the ground. Those who are on the hook of adverse impacts of climate change, we have to take them off the hook. How best that can be done? Joe, it is your challenge. Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Quamrul. And I appreciate how I feel like from various different perspectives, we're coming to this same point where we're talking about the need for stakeholders to be involved, for people to be consulted. And Sharif, what you said about, people can address floods, they can address climate impacts. They have to, in fact. The question is whether they're fully prepared and whether the right information is getting to them early enough. If you get people better information about a storm surge ahead of time, a lot of lives can be saved. If you get the resources to a community in time to be able to hold back, a rising river, you can prevent a lot of damage. Depending where that is and how frequent those impacts are, you can make the insurance industry viable or not, based on whether you trust communities to be able to deliver that frontline response. And because, I think so much of our overall thinking about climate finance, as Quamrul is pointing out, really centers on the sort of high-level, powerful actors doing something that they may not even have the means to do. They may not be able to steer their national legislature. They may not be able to move funds from one area to another. If they were able to include people on the front lines in those decision-making processes, it would be a lot easier to unlock the resources that they do have available, to find those small companies that know what needs to happen in a specific context or can provide the right service at the right time. I think that we're just beginning now to understand that there is no one actor powerful enough to address climate change. Big governments can't do it on their own. Big companies can't do it on their own. Even the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, $130 trillion, is still not a majority of the financial wealth in the world. So there has to be this very considered, effort to put down roots for what will ultimately be transformational climate action. And so, you know, when we ask people to sign up as a citizens climate volunteer, what they're signing up to do is to work in a team with people in their community and to talk to people in government about climate impacts, climate science, macroeconomics, solutions. And they're not doing this in order to, you know, get a certain technology in place or make money for someone. They're doing this because there is a deficit of understanding in that space between the people and the decision makers. They're trying to fill in that space with information that is disinterested, that is fact-based, that is locally relevant. So, you know, for all of these questions about, can we get finance where it needs to go? Can we put the right trade conditions in place? I think that we would be much more empowered in the international decision-making space if we give more room to those ultimate beneficiaries of solutions. You know, one final point here, one really good example of what happens when you open up the process to stakeholder engagement. The Sustainable Development Goals themselves shifted from having a goal on sustainability to all 17 being oriented towards sustainability. And that was one of the highest level insights coming from the My World survey, which consulted over 8 million people in over 174 countries through UN country offices. The benefit of asking everyday people, what do you think is reasonable? Was they would say, it's reasonable not to have these problems. It's reasonable if there are wealthy and powerful people in science and technology and international cooperation to stop having unsustainable crises. That was what came from the people. The political decision makers who think that talking to people is going to reduce ambition. There's no real evidence for that. That's just the conventional wisdom of everyday politics. So if we can all work against that, think about how action for climate empowerment, those 6 areas of public engagement and information, can really refine and detail the action that needs to happen now, we can get implementation.
Thank you, Joshep Robertson, for your long reflection and also some concrete, say, solutions, suggestions, and pieces of advice on our road to Sharm el-Sheikh COP27. Felix.
Yes.
Can you come? Or later?
I'm here.
Okay. George.
Yeah.
Climate finance. How to unlock it?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, I totally agree.
Yeah, and to have it, say, to the people, those who are on the ground, how to support them, how to more empower them with climate finance.
Well, so I totally agree with everything that you said, Mr. Chowdhury, as well as what Mr. Sharif had said earlier. To mobilize grassroots action, engagement and support, that's essential. And really, the enabler to that is climate finance. Our analysis, which I have pasted in the chat, and I welcome for you to share your views with me and share it with your network if you deem it appropriate, shows that there is this strong correlation between delivered climate finance and mitigation plans. And, you know, while I focus on my intervention on climate finance, there's a bunch of other issues that we do talk about in the brief that are important. I focus on climate finance, though, because I think it is an enabler for other elements, for other actions, and crucially, you know, it's not about creating new political commitments. It may be down the road, but an immediate need is just making good on existing commitments. Developed countries have an opportunity to make good on existing climate finance commitments. And by doing so, by doing what they have already committed to do, have a real impact on climate policy, an immediate impact on climate policy. And actually, my final thought is that really that gives me optimism of this year, because we have an incoming COP27 presidency that really understands the importance of the climate finance issue. And I have and has really the confidence, not just of observers and analysts like us, but the broader climate community and diverse group of countries to really focus the agenda and get the climate finance that everybody needs. Of course, understandably, may well focus on some of the key issues for the Africa continent, but I have full confidence that the broader climate finance agenda will get the attention that it deserves, or at least that's our hope, and that's our optimistic tone or hope for optimism for the year ahead.
Thank you. I am also an optimistic person and hope things will move fast in Sharm el-Sheikh and also in Dubai, and then in Eastern Europe at COP29. So down the lane, 3 years from now on, hopefully things will unfold in a very positive momentum, positive way. Tony, in 1 minute.
Hello. Yes, I wanted to respond to what Sharif was saying about engaging people, grassroots people, people in communities and so on.
You are doing it.
Well, exactly.
You are doing it. Yeah,
that's what I was just going to say. That's what we are doing. I will put in the address of the Climate Crisis Project site. And as I say, the toolkit that I'm working on is almost ready to run, and it enables people to set up projects to work together. I talked to my CEO, he's in New Zealand, a while ago, about how much more efficient time-wise it will make the provision and carrying out of such projects possible. And I thought it would take as long as 9 months to get a group of people together to plan out and establish and get the licenses and get the land and all the rest of it for growing some hemp or whatever it is they want to do. And he's corrected me and he said, no, given his experience in various countries in Africa and his time there, he said, no, it's more like 2 years. So this toolkit that I'm building cuts down that time from 2 years to 2 weeks or a month. Okay, so you can do an awful lot of stuff.
Okay.
In 2 years,
okay.
the 2 years that you've saved. And so the reason for expanding the thing into carbon char and biogas is because of the talks I'm having with the new country representative in Kenya.
Okay. Thank you. Felix.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Felix. Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
Yes.
Quite loud and clear. So
go
ahead.
There's a couple of interesting things. Obviously, is that at the end of February, beginning of March, we have the UNFCCC MENA kind of meeting, which is, I suppose, the first of the kind of processes to try and kickstart the route down to Sharm el-Sheikh. And so I'll be interested to see how people are starting to frame priorities and what kind of conversations are going in there. I think Sharif and Joe have both addressed very nicely the idea that, Sharif is saying, people are actually missing from this conversation as we talk about all these high fleeting things is, this is about human security. And Joe's right about the fact of, we should be engaging the people who ultimately will be the beneficiaries. Again, this is people. How do we actually get them mobilized? Because in some respects, they are the people who have a better idea as to what they actually need. So I'll be interested to see how this kind of might be pulled into the process starting at the UNFCCC MENA. But the other thing is, I see my old friend Munir Akram is again the president of the G77 for Pakistan. And I remember when
No,
he was...
is that Munir Akram? I saw another one.
Oh.
Not our old friend Munir Akram, who was in Rio, who was in, say,
Bali.
many COPs, yeah, in Bali, a friend of mine for many moons. But last year, they introduced in G77 meeting Munir Akram, another guy. So not that, say, famous Ambassador Munir Akram.
Right.
I thought, yeah.
Okay. So
namesake, namesake.
What a coincidence! But I'm just wondering, what could we expect under their
because
guidance
he
at
was a great
G77?
troubleshooter. Yeah, he was a great troubleshooter. He can say unite a lot of people, lot of say ambassadors, lot of climate scientists, say environmentalists. But this Munir Akram is a soft-spoken one, not of that say stressor. But hopefully things will be quite fine because there are a lot of others who can help him.
Right. So that's like going to be obviously a process from your perspective as one of your many voices of the least developed countries, the G77 and China and the like-minded countries, is like bringing these kind of conversations, priorities in. How do you think you're going to, from your perspective, this is actually quite interesting because you have a very key role here, Quamrul. How are you going to actually influence these people with your knowledge and your sapiential kind of experience?
You are asking me, you are putting me in a fixed situation. Okay. Say if you ask me, say I have seen a lot of ups and downs in last 30 years in climate policy, in sustainable development negotiations, in environmental negotiations, and everywhere it needs lot of passions, lot of dedication, lot of commitments, and people like our illustrious friend Munir Akram or Ambassador Taj Gupta of India, or say Ambassador Raul Estrada of Argentina, even say Dan from United States, or say Thomas Becker from Denmark, or say Peter Bears from England. These people used to say converse, used to craft out say landing zones, but these people are now fading out, faded away. So it is very difficult to have that kind of passion, that kind of say master class voices, not even in the global south, not even in global north. That is a missing element, especially tragedy for climate negotiation in particular. So with that limitation, we need to say raise our voices. We need to hammer on. We need to try to at times motivate our younger negotiators, younger generation people to say raise the voice of the common masses, people of the global south, even global north, those who are on the ground, on the front line, because you see Hurricane Katrina hit not only say it was not hit the people of Bangladesh or Mozambique or say Marshall Island, it hit people of United States, or say in Europe you have seen this year, last year, even forest fires, even floods, untimely floods, onrush casting waters, even hilltops, mountains, deltas, everywhere people are facing day in and day out adverse impacts of climate change. So how best to raise their voice in our negotiations, and also the scientist predictions, forecast, say code red into the language of our convention, our Paris rule book, to enshrine that in, say, Glasgow Climate Fact and Sharm el-Sheikh is a huge, huge challenge. That challenge we need to respond, but response is a huge task, monumental task, and many of our leaders are not in a mood to hear that. The way Boris Johnson or Joe Biden should act, they are not acting like global leaders. They are acting like, say, a leader of United States or United Kingdom, or say the leaders of the global South. They behave like, say, President of China or Prime Minister of India or South Africa or Brazil. They are not behaving like a leader of global South or global North. And they won't love to face the huge challenge of the mankind, of the planet Mother Earth. That is the monumental problem of this decade. And that problem, how best we can track, like FINA, is of paramount importance down the lane. And if we can rise to the occasion, then only we can have a hope for our generations to come, hope for a planet safe enough, good enough, and can achieve net zero fast, can achieve adaptation goal, can achieve climate finance goal, can also have stabilize global temperature regime. With that, I would like to thank you all. It was a great pleasure to have you all in this 63rd episode of Climate Conversation with Quamrul Chowdhury from Climate Channel. Thank you very, very much, and hope to see you in another episode, another time, on another trans issues. Thank you very much. With that,
thank you. And please ask that question.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye.